Welcome to Trucker of the Night. War zones are known for chaos, violence, and loss. But sometimes, what haunts a soldier isn't an enemy with a rifle. It's something else entirely. These are the stories whispered after deployment, the ones never written in reports. Welcome to the shadows behind the uniform. Static. On Channel 6, I was stationed in northeastern Afghanistan in 2011, near the edge of Nuristan province, at a small forward operating base we called Fob Razor. There were only about 20 of us, combat engineers and a handful of infantry guys tasked with keeping a narrow road open that snaked through a series of valleys. That road was barely more than a dirt scar on the side of the mountains, often washed out or blocked by rock slides. We spent more time rebuilding it than patrolling it. Fob Razor was isolated, the kind of place where, if shit hit the fan, it would take hours for support to reach us, if they could reach us at all. The outpost was built into the rocky terrain, with HESCO barriers and makeshift towers. No civilians nearby, no towns, just mountains, dust, and wind that screamed through the rocks at night. There were no combat incidents for the first month, just heat, boredom, and the usual sleep-deprived irritability that came with manning a post that no one wanted. We rotated watches, patrolled the route, checked IEDs, nothing out of the ordinary, until we started hearing the signal. It was late September. I remember because it was around the time Sergeant Keller broke his ankle on a patrol, and we were short-staffed. I was on radio watch that night with Diaz, the youngest guy in our unit, barely out of high school, baby-faced, always scribbling comics in his notebook. We kept our radios on Channel 6 as part of the standard ops protocol, internal communication only. No one outside the FOB was supposed to transmit on that frequency, but around 0100 hours the static changed. Not just white noise, it had rhythm. A pause here, a short burst, a longer one. It didn't sound random. Diaz and I froze. We both heard it. I asked him if it was Morse code. He didn't know Morse, but we wrote down the sequence anyway. I logged the incident, flagged it as an anomaly, and moved on. The next night it happened again. Same time, same channel, but longer. The pattern was more complex. We handed the notes to Lieutenant Williams, who brushed it off as enemy testing or local chatter bleeding through. But it didn't match anything SIGINT later analyzed. It wasn't Taliban comms. It wasn't civilians. It wasn't anything. On the third night we heard a voice, a garbled whisper buried in the static. Indistinct, but definitely human. The same few words over and over like a prayer or a chant. 6 returns, 6 returns, 6 returns. It chilled me, like something not meant to be heard. We recorded it and brought it to the LT again. This time he took it seriously. He ordered radio silence on Channel 6 and asked us to switch to 7 during night shifts. That should have been the end of it. But that same night, even after switching frequencies, the message came through again. Not on Channel 6, on all channels. We were all in the main bunker when it happened. 4 of us on different devices. Every headset burst with static, then went silent. Then the whisper came again, louder this time, distorted but unmistakable. 6 returns. Diaz ripped off his headset. He was pale, sweating. Said he felt something brush against his shoulder right before the voice came through. We all laughed it off. Tension does weird shit to your head. But Diaz didn't laugh. He asked to sleep in the comms room that night. Said he felt safer near the radios. Diaz didn't show up for morning chow. That wasn't like him. He was always up early, usually already sketching before the rest of us dragged our asses into the mess tent. We found him in the comms room, curled in his chair, radio headset still on. He was awake, but dazed, eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept. When I asked if he was okay, he just whispered, "It was talking to me." All night, we pressed him for details. At first, he didn't want to say, but eventually he told us. After the first whisper, the signal stayed on for hours. He said it shifted frequencies, sometimes cutting to dead silence, sometimes filling the air with what sounded like dozens of overlapping voices, like 100 people whispering in a room with no walls. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. He said one of the voices knew his name. "Come home, Diaz." That's what it said over and over. He was convinced of it. Said it felt like someone standing just behind him, breathing down his neck every time the radio hissed. We chalked it up to exhaustion or a bad dream. The fob was messing with our heads. Too quiet, too remote, too cut off from reality. But then Lieutenant Williams disappeared. That same night, he was doing a solo perimeter check. Standard procedure, quick sweep along the HESCO wall before switching shifts. We heard his boots crunching gravel. He radioed in, said something about hearing voices near the west ridge. Then silence. We scrambled. Floodlights on. Everyone up. 5 of us went out with rifles, combed the area. No blood, no signs of struggle. Just a set of footprints leading out past the western barrier, into the rocks. And then the print stopped, like he'd vanished mid-step. The weirdest part? His radio was still transmitting when we found it, lying in the dirt just outside the last footprint. Static was still coming through, and deep within it, that same goddamn voice. 6 returns. I picked up the radio. It was warm, not from the sun. It was past midnight. No, this warmth felt wrong, like the thing had just been held by someone. Or something. "LT?" I whispered into it. "This is Graves. Do you copy?" The static hissed for a few seconds longer, then cut out completely. Dead. We brought it back to the comms room and tried to scan it, patch it, reset it. Nothing. Not even a power flicker. Diaz wouldn't go near it. He stood at the door, arms crossed, staring like it was going to speak again. And maybe it did, because around 0400, every radio in the FOB clicked on simultaneously. Not a signal, not a broadcast, just breathing. One long inhale, one long exhale, and then, "The gate is open." Diaz started crying. Command classified him as missing in action, likely taken by insurgents, although we all knew that was bullshit. There wasn't a single track past the last footprint. Not one broken rock, not one scuff mark in the gravel. No drag marks, no struggle. It was like he stepped out of this world, or was pulled. The whispers returned the next night. This time, they didn't wait for us to listen. They came through the walls, vibrating in the steel, humming under the concrete, seeping into the sandbags like rot. Diaz snapped, started screaming at the radios, said they were lying, that they were pretending to be people, mimicking voices, trying to confuse us. He pointed at me and said, "You heard it too, Graves. Tell me, I'm not crazy." I didn't say anything, because I had heard it. That voice, the first night, the one that said 6 returns. It didn't sound like just a whisper. It sounded like my father, who'd been dead since 2005. That night, I took first watch alone. I didn't trust myself to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those footprints, the way they just stopped, like the ground had decided not to exist beyond them. I climbed into Tower 2, the one facing west, toward the ridge where LT disappeared. The wind was sharp, full of dust, the kind that cuts your lips open when you breathe through your mouth too long. At 1:56, the static started, even though my headset was off, even though every radio in the base was supposed to be shut down. It came from inside the tower, from the corners, from the space between the walls, not loud, just enough to make you lean in. Then came the voice, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream. "Let us back in!" I nearly fell off the ladder trying to get down. When I hit the ground, I turned around and saw the inside of the tower windows, all 4 panes, etched with the number 6, not drawn, not scratched. Etched like they had been laser burned into the glass from the inside out. I didn't tell the others. What could I say? "Hey guys, our radios are haunted and the glass is screaming." They were already on edge. Morale was unraveling. Diaz wouldn't eat. 2 of the other guys started refusing night watch. And one morning we found one of the Humvees had all 4 tires rotted through, like they'd been sitting in the desert for decades. They were brand new the day before. Command sent a drone out to do a wide perimeter sweep. No heat signatures, no movement, just a thin circular area west of the fob where the ground had turned black, like something had scorched it from above, or maybe from underneath. It formed a perfect ring, about 50 feet wide, exactly the same distance as the last place we saw LT's footprints. We started calling it the Ring. No one said it out loud, but we all knew it was the center of whatever was happening. Radios glitched the moment they were carried within 100 feet of it. Our compasses spun like they were in a microwave. Birds wouldn't fly over it. The Afghan interpreter we worked with, Hamid, refused to even look at it. He told us something once, quietly, while cleaning his rifle. My grandfather said there are places the Prophet never walked, places that do not belong to God. None of us laughed, because we agreed. The following night I caught Diaz standing at the edge of the ring, just staring. He didn't have gear on, no helmet, no rifle, just his undershirt and boots, dust clinging to his skin like ash. I grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back. He didn't fight, didn't speak, just stared into my eyes and said, "They're not trying to come in. They're trying to pull us out." I asked him who they were. He only said 6. 2 hours later, we heard gunshots inside the FOB. I sprinted back with 2 others and found Private Monroe in the motor pool, blood on his face, hands shaking, eyes wild. He kept repeating the same thing. He was already dead. He was already dead. He was already... There was a body slumped beside him. We turned it over. It was Lieutenant Williams. Same uniform, same gear, same burn scar above the left eye that he got back in 2009. But the body was bone dry, like it had been sitting in the desert sun for months. When we tried to call it in, the radios wouldn't transmit. Not static, not interference, just silence. As if nothing existed beyond the walls of FOB Razor anymore. As if we'd been cut off, not just from command, but from the rest of the world. We buried LT Williams, or whatever that was, in a shallow grave near the comms shack. Command never acknowledged the report. 3 days later, a Black Hawk flew over our location but never landed. Just circled twice, then vanished to the south. Like they were checking to see if we were still here, or confirming something else. That night Diaz went missing. I was the last one to see him. He walked into the ring barefoot, holding his sketchbook to his chest. I shouted, but he didn't turn around. He just kept walking toward the center until he reached the very middle. He stood there for maybe 5 seconds. Then he was gone. Not blinked out, not vanished in light, just gone. Like a blink between frames in a movie. 1 second there, the next, nothing. There were only 5 of us left at that point. We stopped sleeping in shifts. We stayed together in the communications room. All our gear was packed, weapons loaded, eyes constantly on the entrance. The static came back stronger, louder. Sometimes we'd hear footsteps circling the building, bare feet slapping against concrete. Other times it was voices coming from inside our heads. Not thoughts, voices. Saying things we'd never told anyone, memories, secrets. Things that had died with the people we'd lost. On the final night, we made a decision. We were going to abandon FOB Razor at dawn, hike out on foot if we had to, signal a convoy or flag down a drone. Anything. We just had to make it to morning. At 3:06 a.m., every light went out. Then the static started, louder than ever before, not just in the radios, but in the walls, in our teeth, vibrating through our bones. And the voice came back, all of them, hundreds, thousands, all speaking as one. 6 returns. 6 was never gone. 6 is you. I woke up on the floor, covered in dust, alone, no radios, no weapons, no people, just silence. And then, from the open door of the comms room, I saw the sun rising over the mountains, and dozens of boot prints in the dirt, all leading away from the base, all barefoot. I made it to the highway 4 days later. A transport unit picked me up and flew me to Bagram. I told them we were ambushed. That FOB Razor was overrun. I lied, because if I told them the truth, they wouldn't have believed me. They would have sent me back. Now, every time I pass by a radio and hear a flicker of static, every time I catch a whisper I can't quite explain, I listen, because I know what it's saying. 6 returns, and one day, so will I. The sand beneath our boots, as told by a U.S. infantry soldier stationed in Iraq, I didn't know what I expected when I got deployed to Iraq. Maybe noise, maybe fire, maybe hell on earth. But what I didn't expect, what no one warned me about, was the silence. We were set up at a temporary outpost, the kind thrown together for a few weeks while bigger operations were underway. This one was near a deserted village called Al-Qasr, north of Baghdad. The place was empty, no kids, no dogs, no elderly men watching us from rooftops. Just sand, heat, and silence that pressed down on your chest like a weight. There were 9 of us in our squad. We ran daily patrols, swept the area, ran perimeter checks. At night we rotated guard shifts. I had second watch, 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. The worst time when your body wants to collapse and your thoughts turn cold. It started during one of those watches. I was in the South Tower, goggles on, headset tuned to the internal channel. Around 3:13 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not the wind, not an animal. Human footsteps. Slow, deliberate, stopping right beneath the tower. I raised my M4 and shouted the challenge code. Silence. I leaned over, scanned with the infrared beam. Nothing. But I felt it, like someone was standing down there, staring up at me. No movement, no sound. But something was there. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I told Vargas, one of our team leaders. He didn't laugh it off. He just said, "You're not the first." Turns out he'd been hearing footsteps too for the last 3 nights. Said they came near the generator behind the bunkhouse, always between 3 and 4 a.m., always when he was alone. "You think someone's watching us?" I asked. "No," he said flatly. "I think it's already in here. That night, We buried motion sensors around the perimeter, standard thermal triggers. If someone tried to sneak in, we'd know. At 2:44 a.m., one of them tripped. I was in the east tower with Lawrence. We checked the monitor. One dot appeared, right on the edge of the perimeter. It moved slowly for a few seconds, and then just vanished. We geared up and swept the area. Rifles up, flashlights on. Nothing. Just smooth, untouched sand. No prints, no wind disturbance. Like nothing had ever been there. Then we heard it, a crunch behind us. We turned fast. Lawrence shouted. But all we saw were our own tracks and silence. Back at the tower, we reviewed the thermal camera. 5 seconds before we turned around, it had picked up a figure, humanoid, stationary, standing directly in front of us. Then, nothing. 2 days later, we lost Samuels. Not physically, mentally. He was our loudmouth, always talking trash, cracking jokes. But that morning he was silent. Sat alone in the corner of the bunker, rocking slightly, staring at the floor. We thought he was sick. By afternoon, he snapped, screamed that they were already inside, that we needed to seal the well. What well? I asked. The one in the village square, he whispered. They opened it, days ago. We shouldn't have come here. There was no well on our intel maps, so we searched, and we found it, buried beneath a tarp and rubble at the center of the village plaza. An old, dry stone well, no bucket, no rope, just a dark, gaping hole. But at the bottom, there were scratches, deep ones, claw marks, as if something had been climbing out. We didn't tell command about the well. We should have. But something about it felt wrong, like it shouldn't be documented. Like the moment we put it in a report, it would become real in a way we couldn't undo. Vargas and I took turns watching it. During the day, it was just a hole, silent, unmoving. But at night, it became something else. There were sounds barely audible beneath the desert wind. Not voices exactly, but something like whispering water or claws on stone. A soft, dragging sound that made the hair on your arms rise. Samuels refused to go near it. After his outburst, he barely spoke. He just sat in the corner of the comms shack, mumbling to himself. We kept him off duty and monitored him, but none of us knew what the hell we were supposed to do. We weren't trained for this. 3 nights after we found the well, it happened again. I was pulling another late shift with Lawrence when the generator cut out. Dead silence. Then came the screaming. It was Samuel's. We sprinted back toward the main tent and found him outside, kneeling in the dirt, arms limp at his sides, staring into the sky. His mouth was open wide, screaming without breathing. It was this continuous, rattling sound, like a machine failing to start. We tried to shake him. Lawrence slapped him. No response. Then he stopped. In an instant, the sound cut off, and he fell forward, unconscious. We brought him inside. His pulse was fine. He was breathing, but still wouldn't speak. Just trembled, eyes darting around like he was watching something that wasn't there. The next morning, we took a vote. Unanimous. We had to collapse the well. We weren't engineers, but we had explosives. Controlled demo was something we'd all trained for, even if it wasn't exactly standard protocol to use it on a hole in the ground. But none of us questioned it. We packed the interior with what we had, C4 and plastic charges, and set the timer. When it went off, the blast echoed across the empty village, shaking the air and spraying dust high into the morning sun. We approached the site with weapons drawn. The hole was gone, buried, sealed, But in the silence that followed, we heard something else. A moan, faint, from beneath the ground. Vargas turned to me. "Tell me you heard that." I nodded. I wished I hadn't. Later that night it rained. Rain in the desert is rare, but it came in sheets, heavy and cold. The village was soaked in minutes, and water began pooling near the center of the square, right where the well had been. I stepped outside during my watch, rain pelting my helmet, and I saw them. Footprints, in the mud, bare feet, leading away from the center of the square. One pair, then another, and another. They came from beneath the ground. I followed them with my light, stunned. They didn't stop. They weaved through our outpost, silent and muddy, then vanished at the edge of the village. No one was on duty but me. No one else had walked there. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with my rifle across my lap, watching the mud dry slowly under the moonlight. Every few minutes I'd scan with the night vision scope, convinced something was watching us from just beyond the edge of the square. But nothing moved. In the morning I showed Vargas the footprints. He didn't speak. He just stared at them for a long time before nodding once and walking off. That was the day he started writing letters. Dozens of them. Handwritten, sealed, hidden in the bottom of his pack. I only know because I caught him stuffing one into a loose ammo pouch. He didn't even try to deny it. "Just in case," he said. 3 nights later, we lost power again. It wasn't the generator this time. We had just received replacements, but everything shut down at once. Radios, GPS, perimeter sensors. Even our encrypted sat phone went dead. We checked the fuses, the connections, all clean. There was no reason for it. It was like something had sucked the life out of the entire FOB. That was the night the voices came back. It started in the comms shack. Diaz was the first to hear them. Quiet, murmuring, like Arabic prayers played backward at half speed. He called me in, eyes wide. I slipped on the headset and froze. The voices weren't random. They were calling our names. "Vargas, Diaz, Alan." I threw the headset off. The noise didn't stop. It was coming from every radio in the outpost, whether powered or not, even the ones we had disconnected completely. Some of them crackled, some whispered. One of them was screaming in a voice like Samuels's, but warped, drawn out and hollow. Vargas gathered everyone. We destroyed the radios, smashed them with hammers, burned the wires, crushed the handsets. It didn't matter. At 3:44 a.m., Samuels stood up, walked calmly into the rain, and disappeared into the dark. We never found him. The next day, Diaz started digging. He wouldn't say why. He just said, "They didn't die down there." We tried to stop him. We even locked him in the supply tent. But the next morning the lock was broken and he was gone. He'd reopened the well. We found the hole deeper than before, twice as wide. The earth around it looked torn, like something had clawed its way out. And Diaz? No sign of him. But his boots were there, still laced, still standing upright in the mud. That night the village wasn't empty anymore. We saw figures in the rain, dozens of them standing still, just beyond the light of the FOB. Barefoot, soaked, unmoving. Their bodies were human, but too long, too thin, as if they'd been stretched by something beneath the earth. And their faces, what little we could see, weren't right. Eyes too wide, mouths slightly open, like they were still screaming. Vargas ordered no fire unless fired upon. I asked, "What if they don't need guns?" He didn't answer. They stood there for hours, through the rain, through the cold, through the silence. We kept watch in shifts, eyes straining through scopes and fogged optics. No one fired a shot. No one dared to. Because something deep down told us that if we acknowledged them, really acknowledged them, it would give them permission. Around 4 a.m., they began to move. Not forward, down. One by one, the figures turned and walked away from the FOB. But they didn't vanish into the desert. They returned to the center of the village, to the well. They crawled in, one at a time, silently, like they belonged there, like they were going home. By sunrise, they were gone. The outpost didn't last much longer. We never officially abandoned it. Command just didn't rotate in a new squad. We weren't supposed to know that, but the last resupply chopper dropped off gear for a replacement team that never came. A week later, a blacked-out convoy showed up. 4 Humvees, no markings, no insignias. They didn't salute, they didn't speak. They walked straight to the well, planted charges, detonated them. Whatever had crawled out before, they weren't taking chances this time. The whole plaza collapsed inward. Dust and stone swallowed the whole. One of the men stayed behind to set up remote surveillance. He had no name patch, just a black flag on his shoulder. The kind you only see in conspiracy theories and in stories that never make it to debriefings. He handed Vargas a drive, told him to give it to no one but Command Central, Fort Bragg. No explanation. We were transferred 2 days later. No commendations. No mention of the incident in our files. Samuels and Diaz were listed as MIA, presumed hostile territory. That was all. Vargas never spoke about the well again. I never asked, but I still think about it. Every week, every time I close my eyes. That image of barefoot figures sliding silently back into the earth like they were being reclaimed, like they were never supposed to leave. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't buried it. Other times I wonder if we buried it deep enough. Checkpoint Echo, narrated by a former U.S. Army specialist deployed in western Iraq. People assume the worst part about being stationed in Iraq is the heat, or the boredom, or the fear of getting blown up at any second. But they're wrong. The worst part is the waiting. Waiting for a convoy. Waiting for a drone flyover. Waiting for anything to happen. That kind of silence. It does things to a man. In 2007, I was assigned to a security detail just outside Ramadi, guarding Checkpoint Echo, a single-lane choke point in the middle of a dried-out wadi. The terrain was perfect for ambushes. Elevated cliffs on both sides, sharp bends in the road. Nowhere to run. But for weeks, nothing happened. The locals avoided the area. Our patrols reported 0 contacts. It was like the desert had swallowed everything in a 100-mile radius. Just us, the sand, and an empty concrete station half covered in spray paint from old regime slogans. The graffiti on the walls wasn't Arabic, though. That's the first thing I noticed. It was something else. Spirals, jagged lines, looping curves like someone had tried to write words that didn't belong in this world. I mentioned it to Corporal Hensley, my post buddy. He laughed it off, said the Iraqis were superstitious, said the checkpoint was known to be cursed. Whole damn sector's weird, he told me. We had a guy go AWOL last rotation. Never found his body, just his boots and helmet sitting in the guard tower. I thought he was screwing with me, until it started happening again. It began with the lights. Every night at exactly 2 a.m., the floodlight on the north tower would short out. We'd replace the bulb, check the wiring, everything clean. Power supply was stable, but the second the clock hit 200, it would flicker. Once, twice, then die. Every night. Then the radio static started. At first it was subtle, white noise, nothing unusual. But soon we began picking up breathing. Heavy, labored, like someone was sitting just on the other side of the channel, waiting to speak. One night I swear I heard my name. Specialist Graves. I froze. Hensley heard it too. He yanked off his headset, pale as hell, and said, "Dude, that wasn't your voice." The next night we were on watch again, 1:58 a.m. We were tense, silent, watching the floodlight. Right at 2 o'clock the light blinked out. This time, though, we didn't just lose the bulb, we lost power to the entire tower. No lights, no radio, just dark. And then we saw someone walking up the road. No lights, no vehicle, just a figure moving slowly, head down. Hensley raised his rifle. I called out, challenged in both English and Arabic. No response. They kept walking. We flipped on a flashlight. Too late. The figure was gone. Just gone. No dust trail. No tracks. Nothing. The command tried to keep us calm, told us it was heat exhaustion, nerves, even suggested Hensley and I were overstimulated and needed rest. They rotated us out for 3 days, sent a fresh team from Alpha Company to man Echo, while we got some R&R at the forward base. I didn't rest. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that silhouette, walking up the road with no face, no light, no sound. When we came back, Alpha was already gone. No handoff, no logbook, no communications, just gone. The tent was zipped, rations unopened, water still cool, but no sign of any of the 4 soldiers assigned to relieve us. We tried radioing command. No answer. Then we checked the security footage. The camera feed had glitched for nearly 3 hours the night before. When it came back on, all 4 soldiers were gone. All 4, just empty chairs, rifles left behind. Their gear was still there. Boots, helmets, same as before. We searched the entire area, 2 clicks in every direction. Nothing. Not a single print in the sand. No tire tracks. No blood. That night I stayed in the tower alone. I know. Stupid. But something about this place had sunk its hooks into me. I needed to understand. Around 2 a.m., the power cut out again. And I wasn't alone. I felt it before I saw it. Cold. Like the air had been sucked out of the room. My breath frosted. I could see the vapor in front of me. Then the door creaked open. Slow and deliberate, I raised my rifle. "Identify yourself." No answer. Then I heard it. Footsteps, heavy, wet, climbing the metal stairs, one at a time. I braced, sweating, finger on the trigger. But when I stepped out onto the platform, no one was there. Just the desert stretching out in all directions and the road running black into the hills. I turned to re-enter the tower and, there was mud on the floor. 2 footprints, barefoot. And then the whispering started again. The whispering wasn't coming from the radio this time. It was inside the tower, software indistinct, like multiple voices speaking all at once in different tones, some high-pitched, others guttural and animal-like. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them, like they were vibrating in my skull, in my bones. I swept the room again. Nothing. Then I noticed something new. One of the spiral markings from the checkpoint wall, drawn in the condensation on the glass. Just hanging there. Perfect. Curved like a brand burned into the cold. I wiped it off. Turned around. There were 3 more behind me. 1 on the floor. 2 on the inside of the door. None of them had been there a second ago. I didn't sleep after that. Hensley came to relieve me and found me crouched in the corner of the tower, rifle aimed at the stairs, soaked in sweat. I didn't say anything. Just got up, handed him the weapon, and went straight to the armory. I took every flare we had. That night we lit the perimeter with magnesium, a ring of fire around the checkpoint, burning white and hot. No one was getting through without us seeing. And for a while, it worked. The static didn't come back. The light stayed on. But the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. Just after 3 a.m., we saw movement on the hill. Not one figure this time. Dozens. Standing just outside the reach of the light. Not moving, not blinking. Some of them were wearing uniforms. Ours. I swear I saw Private Lewis, who'd gone missing during a routine patrol last month, and behind him, Corporal Vance, except his face wasn't right. It was too long. His jaw hung open, as if unhinged, and his eyes glowed faintly like static on a dead screen. Hensley whispered, "Tell me that's not real." I couldn't. We didn't sleep. We didn't talk. We just waited for dawn. And when it finally came, they were gone. No tracks, no shadows, no heat signatures, nothing. Like they had never been there. But they had. Because etched into the side of the tower, scratched deep into the concrete with something sharp, was a message. Checkpoints are for the living. After that night, we stopped reporting what we saw. Command wasn't listening. And deep down, I don't think we wanted to explain it anymore. Echo had crossed into something else, something that didn't fit into our orders or field manuals. We started sleeping in shifts, always with someone awake. We never turned our backs to the road. We never shut both eyes at once. Hensley kept a journal, drawing the symbols we kept finding etched into the walls, burned into the sand, carved into ammo crates. One morning I woke to find my own dog tags hanging from a nail outside the tower. I was still wearing mine. These were identical. Same name, same number, same blood type. Only difference? They were rusted and warm. The final straw came 3 nights later. We were on high alert after spotting one of the figures inside the wire just past the southern barrier. Hensley and I pursued with rifles, circling the station. We lost visual behind the wrecked APC. And then we found him, Hensley, staring at a figure that looked exactly like me. Same uniform, same face, except its eyes were black, not hollow, not bloody, just wrong. It smiled and vanished. Hensley looked at me like he didn't trust what he was seeing anymore. "What if you're not you?" That was the last thing he said to me. He was gone by sunrise. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Just his journal, left open on the guard table. The final entry read, "One of them came inside last night. It knew my name. It knew my voice. It said I belonged to it now." When Command finally pulled me from Checkpoint Echo, I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just boarded the Humvee and never looked back. They closed the checkpoint a week later, classified it as compromised due to infrastructure erosion, and reassigned the area to drone surveillance only. They didn't mention the disappearances, or the symbols, or the things in the dark. Sometimes I dream of the road. I see a line of soldiers walking back toward the checkpoint. Uniforms sun-bleached and torn, boots full of dust, dog tags swinging from blackened necks, and every single one of them has my face. The Whispering in Fob Kandar, narrated by a U.S. Marine deployed near the Syrian border. Fob Kandar was never supposed to be permanent. It started as a dirt staging post near the Syrian border. Nothing but tents, satellite dishes, and metal containers arranged like Lego bricks. But over time it grew. Watchtowers, reinforced barracks, a motor pool, even a chapel made from plywood and sandbags. By the time I arrived in 2018, the place felt like a forgotten limb of the war. Dusty, tired and haunted. Not by ghosts, but by routines that hadn't changed in over a decade. Most of the Marines just called it the box. No one liked being assigned there. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Kandar never slept. There was always something. Whining wind, engines idling, generators humming. But buried beneath all of it was a whisper. At first I thought it was just me. Sleep deprivation, maybe auditory pareidolia. But then one night, Corporal Mendoza came up to me after watch, pale, shaking. "Do you hear it too?" he asked. I didn't have to ask what he meant. It always happened around 3:17 a.m. No matter where you were on base, guard tower, barracks, motor pool, you'd hear it. Like someone muttering just outside your hearing range. Not a language, not even words, just intention. Like a voice meant to be heard without being understood. At first it was subtle, but then people started talking about dreams, nightmares of being buried alive, of sand filling their mouths, of faces under the floorboards of the barracks, whispering up through the plywood. One guy said he woke up to find muddy handprints on the inside of his sleeping bag. Another said he dreamed of digging through the concrete, clawing into the ground until he found his own bones. Then came the incident with Sergeant Wilkes. Wilkes was a hard-ass, the kind of guy who didn't flinch at incoming fire. One night, during a routine watch rotation, he walked out of the south gate. Didn't tell anyone, didn't bring gear, just walked into the desert. They found him 2 hours later, standing barefoot in the wadi, eyes rolled back, mouth moving without sound. When they carried him back, he kept whispering, "It's not inside the base is inside it." He died 2 days later of a brain aneurysm, but no one talked about it. Official reports said heat stroke. Unofficially, everyone knew something was wrong. After Wilkes died, things got worse. We started hearing footsteps in the gravel at night, always behind us, always just outside the light. Patrols came back shaken, claiming to see figures standing between the HESCO barriers. Never clearly, just movement, shadows in uniform, watching. Then people started finding their own voices on the radios. At 3:17 a.m., the frequency would pop. Short burst of static, and then you'd hear someone whispering. But not random chatter. It was you, saying things you never remembered saying. One night, Private Koji recorded his watch logs. When he played them back, he heard himself saying, "They were here before we built this place. We poured the concrete over their mouths. Now they're learning how to speak again." He was medically evacuated a week later. Psych evol. Never came back. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But one night I had a dream. I was sitting in the chow tent, alone. The lights were out, everything drenched in red emergency glow. I could hear the wind outside, and then, beneath it, the whispering. Only this time I could understand it. It said, "We are the silence you left behind. We are what remains when the war forgets. You built your homes on our bones. When I woke up, my hands were full of dirt, real dirt, packed under my nails, smeared across my palms. I slept inside a steel container with the door locked from the inside. There was no dirt anywhere near my rack. That morning the chapel burned down. No sign of fire, no fuel, just ashes where it stood. A single phrase was scorched into the wall behind it, written in soot. No God left here. After the chapel burned, the base changed. You could feel it in the air, like pressure before a storm. The wind sounded thicker. The shadows stretched farther than they should have. People started keeping their lights on all night, even though the generators were starting to fail. We didn't talk about the whispers anymore. We just listened. silently, pretending we didn't hear them. Then Mendoza went missing, disappeared between shifts. No one saw him leave. No one heard anything. His gear was still in his bunk, rifle untouched, boots gone. We searched the perimeter for 6 hours, found him at dawn, buried up to his neck in sand just outside the northern wall. Still alive, mouth full of dirt, eyes wide open. He couldn't speak, couldn't blink, just shivered. They medevaced him within the hour. Word came back 3 days later. Brain function normal, body intact, but Mendoza hadn't said a word since they pulled him out, except once. According to the report, a nurse overheard him whisper, "I heard my name below the floorboards." That's when we found the tunnel, beneath the maintenance shed. It had been hidden under a stack of crates, just a circular hole, maybe 3 feet wide, descending into pitch darkness. The walls weren't carved. They were worn smooth, like something had moved up and down through it for decades, maybe centuries. We should have reported it, should have sealed it, but we didn't, because we were afraid of what might come out if we did. 2 nights later, we heard someone crying inside the tunnel. It sounded like Sergeant Wilkes, then like Mendoza, then like me. I stood at the edge with a flashlight. The light didn't reach far, just enough to see the top of the shaft, and something just out of sight, breathing. It stopped crying when it noticed me, and then it laughed. The laugh followed me back to my bunk. I didn't sleep. At some point during the night, the whispering got louder. It wasn't background noise anymore. It was everywhere, coming from the walls, the vents, the damn mattress springs. I covered my ears and it was still there, pressed into my brain like static soaked in blood. People started breaking down. One guy bashed his radio to pieces with a crowbar. Another refused to speak at all, convinced his words were being recorded by something under the sand. A third walked out into the desert naked, humming the Marine Corps hymn with blood coming from his ears. We tried to hold it together. We failed. The last night I spent at FOB Kandar, I was on solo watch at the northeast tower. The air was still. The sky was dead black. Then the whispering stopped. Not faded, stopped, instantly, like someone had hit a cosmic mute button, and I heard breathing behind me, slow, deep, just inches from my neck. I turned fast, rifle up, flashlight on. Nothing. But on the wall behind me, scrawled in perfect English, fresh like it had been burned into the metal with heat, "You were never alone here." They pulled us out the next morning. No warning, no explanation, just a convoy and a set of sealed orders. We were told FOB Kandar had been compromised by infrastructure decay. Within the week, satellite surveillance showed the entire area had collapsed in on itself, like something underneath had finally decided to pull the ground back into its mouth. I still hear the whispering sometimes, only at 3:17 a.m., only when I'm alone. And sometimes I wake up with sand in my mouth. Rest Zone 45. They told us it would only be 3 days. Just a quick holdover at an old logistics post in the Ambar Desert while the next supply convoy regrouped. Guard the crates, keep the zone warm, nothing fancy, nothing dangerous. Rest Zone 45, they called it, which already sounded like a joke. There's no rest in Anbar. There were 4 of us assigned. Staff Sergeant Malloy, Corporal Rudd, Private Harris, and myself, Specialist Graves. We flew in on a Chinook just before sunset, and even the pilot didn't wait for the blades to stop spinning before he lifted off again. Zone 45 was a skeleton. 2 CHUs, containerized housing units, a busted satellite dish, a diesel generator half buried in sand, and a perimeter fence that looked like it had been erected by blind ants. Just barbed wire strung between leaning poles with motion sensors zip-tied like afterthoughts. It was surrounded by nothing. Miles and miles of cracked desert. No towns, no roads, no patrols. It felt wrong from the beginning, like we were squatting somewhere we weren't supposed to be. We spent the first night settling in. Malloy took inventory. Rudd set up a crude overwatch using sandbags and a spotting scope, and I got the comms unit working. For a while, at least. Harris did nothing mostly. Kid was green and nervous and whispered prayers under his breath like it was a habit he couldn't shake. The generator failed 3 times before midnight. By 200, the air was thick and buzzing, and none of us could sleep. At 2:17 a.m., motion sensor A6 went off. It was the northwest perimeter. We assumed it was wind, maybe a loose pole or a coyote. Malloy and I went out with flashlights and rifles. The air was dead still, too still, no wind, no sound, just the heat clinging to your neck, like sweat that wouldn't dry. There was nothing at A6, no movement, no tracks, but the sensor light stayed blinking. We reset it and walked back, trying to ignore the way it blinked twice more after we left. The next day, the food in one of the supply crates spoiled. All of it. Sealed MREs. Rotting. Full of flies. We logged the incident. Harris swore he'd seen one of the crates open during the night, but Malloy chewed him out. Said he was dreaming. But that night, another sensor went off. This time, we checked the camera feed. Each motion sensor had a cam feed patched to the main panel. The monitor flickered, then showed someone standing inside the wire, barefoot, still, not moving, not facing the camera, just standing there. We rushed out. Nothing. Again. But this time, the camera feed corrupted. The file glitched and erased itself before we could back it up. Malloy stayed quiet the rest of the night. The third day started with blood. I woke to Harris screaming outside the CHU. We ran out, rifles up, half asleep, expecting an attack, but he was alone, standing barefoot in the sand, trembling, staring at his hands. They were covered in blood, not his. We dragged him inside, checked him for wounds. Nothing, not a scratch. He just kept mumbling. I didn't open the door. When he finally calmed down, he said he'd heard someone knocking during the night. He assumed it was Malloy on patrol. When he opened the door, no one was there, except a crate, the same kind we'd inventoried on day 1, sitting outside the CHU like a delivery. It hadn't been there when we went to bed. We opened it. Inside was a single item, a helmet, caked in dried blood and dirt. Malloy stared at it for a long time. Then he quietly walked out and threw up behind the generator. When he came back, he didn't say a word, just turned off the camera feeds and sat in the corner with his rifle. That afternoon, we checked the sensor logs. None of them had been tripped, not one, which meant whoever left the helmet had walked right through our defenses, or worse, never came through the fence at all. That night, the generator died for good. We set up chem lights and lanterns inside the CHUs, but the darkness outside felt alive, like the sky had thickened, pressing down on us. I took first watch. At 2:06 a.m., the radio clicked on by itself. No static, no signal, just one sound. Breathing, slow, rhythmic, wet. I tried turning the unit off. It stayed on. Then a voice came through, not a whisper, a growl. Rest is over. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. By the morning of day 4, something had changed in Malloy. He stopped eating, didn't speak. He just sat in the corner of the CHU with his rifle across his lap. eyes fixed on the metal floor like he was waiting for it to open up beneath him. Harris refused to leave his bunk. He stared at the wall for hours, whispering things none of us could understand. I caught one phrase, though. He kept repeating it under his breath. "They don't need the door anymore." Rudd and I tried to keep the routine, check the crates, walk the perimeter, keep the illusion that we were still in control. At 15:30 hours, we discovered the hole. It was behind the generator, half covered in sand and barely visible unless you were looking for it. Circular, about a meter across, deep, lined with smooth, packed dirt. Not natural, not dug by any of us. There were handprints around the edge, dozens of them, some small, some impossibly long, all leading out. That night we set perimeter lights using battery packs from the crates. We wired them in a circle around the CHUs, placed motion sensors every 10 feet. Malloy volunteered to take watch alone. I should have known better. At 0213, we were all woken by the sound of metal, dragging, screeching, like a crowbar, against the side of the CHU. We ran outside. Malloy was gone. No footprints, no scuffle, just his rifle leaning against the sensor pole and a single bloody handprint on the wall of the CHU next to the door. The blood was still warm. We checked the perimeter. The lights had all turned inward, not cut, not broken, repositioned, like something wanted us to see ourselves from every angle. Back inside, we checked the camera feeds one more time. Only one camera was still functioning, facing the interior of the supply crates. At exactly 2:44 a.m., one of the crates opened on its own. A figure stepped out. Not crawled, stepped. It was wearing Malloy's uniform, but the body was too long. The arms hung below the knees. The neck twisted slightly, like it didn't know how to hold the weight of the head. It turned toward the camera. The face was wrong, unfocused, blurred, as if the lens refused to recognize it. Then it reached toward the lens, and the feed cut to black. We packed what we could and made the call. We were leaving at first light. No orders, no extraction. Just grab the rifles, take the compass, and head southeast until we found a road or a patrol. We sealed the CHUs behind us. I don't know why. We knew it wouldn't stop anything. But it felt like closing a door on something that had already come through. Rudd didn't make it past the wire. We were 10 minutes out when we noticed he wasn't behind us. Turned around. Nothing. No prints, no dust trail, no sound. Only his shadow was still there, cast on the sand like he'd kept walking while his body stayed behind. We stood there, frozen, staring at it. It was still moving, like it was waiting for someone to come back and fill it. Harris lost it after that. He kept muttering, pointing at the sky. "They're not under us anymore," he said. "They're above now." I didn't understand until I looked up. Something was blocking the stars. Not a shape, just absence. A wide patch of sky that swallowed starlight. That pulsed like it was breathing. And from above, I swear I heard the same voice that had spoken through the radios. "Rest is over." I don't remember the next few hours, just flashes, running, falling, screaming, the feeling of sand in my throat and blood in my eyes. I woke up alone on the edge of Highway 17. A convoy found me dehydrated and delusional. I told them the others had been taken. They asked who. I couldn't remember any of their names. Not Rudd, not Harris, not even Malloy. I looked at my own name tape, hoping I still recognized it. A month later, I was discharged. Stress-induced dissociation, they said. I've tried looking up Rest Zone 45. No records, no satellite images, no logbooks, like it never existed. But some nights around 2:44 a.m., my phone picks up a strange Bluetooth signal. It comes and goes. No name, no device found. Just a short transmission when I try to connect. Crate ready for extraction. I don't answer, because I know what's inside, and I know it's waiting for me. If you've ever felt something watching you during a quiet patrol, or heard your name whispered over a dead radio, you're not alone. Some stories never made it into the reports, but they're still out there, waiting. Drop your story in the comments. And if this one kept you looking over your shoulder, subscribe to Trucker of the Night. We're just getting started.